Yasei no Last Boss ga Arawareta is one of these animes where I actually have read the manga before, which, itself is based on a light novel, and I'm in no way caught up with the recent chapters. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is that I went into this anime with a certain amount of expectations, having read a sort of source material before. So have these expectations been met, or have I been let down? Well, let me talk about that, by first delving into the story. Last Boss essentially starts off with the final fight against the titular Last Boss, with no introduction whatsoever. Of course, it's revealed pretty quickly that this is just a cabal of players playing through a made-up scenario in the MMO X-Gate. This is done to kind of finish the story that the player started, since the specialty of that game is that notable players are getting written into the lore of the game itself. And as such, after this fight, we see our protagonist, with his ridiculously large headphones, sitting in front of his PC, getting some nice comments about how spectacular this fight was. He then gets an offer from the goddess of the game, telling him, hey, I have a new role for you, which he quickly accepts, thinking it's just a message from the devs, maybe a new character or something, only for him to suddenly wake up in the body of a woman. That's right, this is a classic isekai with an OP protagonist story. Basically, the characters inside of the world of X-Gate wanted to summon a hero to take care of the Devil King. And as such, they, by accident, summoned the protagonist into the world, into his own character, Lufas Mafal, which was sealed 200 years ago. There's then already a bit of weirdness going on, as the protagonist is trying to talk to them in a calm and normal way, but instead it comes out as if he was still role-playing as Lufas. He then quickly though moves on and just leaves them be. Lufas is then just flying around and exploring the world of X-Gate. I mean, everybody would probably want to explore their favorite game's worlds if they were transported into it. Until she then arrives at her home, where she sits down on her throne. And there we get the first instance of her remembering something that was not inside of the game's lore. Before she can ruminate further on that though, she does get interrupted by a new character, Dina the Advisor, which in the game was just some sort of background character that was there as decoration. Dina's first role in the story is to serve as a sort of infodump for Lufas and us the viewers, to catch us up on recent events. And also then to provide a mission that Lufas can follow, to catch all the Pokemon. I mean to catch all the 12 Heavenly Stars. The 12 Heavenly Stars are a set of powerful monsters that used to serve Lufas, but are currently either out seeking revenge for her or doing whatever. But before Dina and Lufas can go on this mission, they do need some funds. They then go into a tavern to pick up a quest, and this just serves as an excuse to show off just how powerful Lufas truly is. This is not bad, but the structure of finishing the end of a game, getting sucked into it, getting some exposition, and then a battle to show off the power is nothing revolutionary. It works, however, and makes for a fun first episode. Episode 2 then already slows down a little bit, giving us more exposition as to why Lufas is so strong in the first place. Essentially, her current level is 1000, which was the max level in the game X-Gate. But since that period of 200 years ago, the level has drastically fallen down, where even stronger adventurers are at around 120. This is because, well, they only have one life. I do actually like this concept, because it really makes sense that when there's no revival system, that people just would not reach high levels to begin with. Afterwards, Lufas and Dina move on to the city of Swell for 3 reasons. First, because the first star Ares is there. Second, to learn more about the period between the game and the resurrection of Lufas. And third, to meet the hero Megres. As for the third, there's one thing I forgot to mention. Lufas is also trying to find other players. As such, it does make sense to go and find the other heroes that she used to play with. One problem there, however, is that only 3 of them picked long-living races. Before Luthos can get much done, however, she gets interrupted by Ares starting his attack, which she has to intercept. As you might be able to tell, Last Boss has a lot of setup to do. Because of that, even up until the last episode, despite all of the adventures, it feels a little like you are watching a prologue. Despite that, I thought that the anime remained intriguing. This is thanks to some twists and an overall mystery that surrounds the world. By the end of the last episode, we are left with a lot of things still open and none of the goals are really fulfilled. I am hopeful, however, since not only do we get the classic "to be continued" screen, which announces the second season, but there's also the fact that the light novel is actually finished. This is always a big concern of mine when it comes to these sorts of adaptations. Then getting to the art and animation, I do have some mixed feelings about it. This is not because it's bad, since Last Boss is managing to spread its budget quite nicely. From the first until the last episode, I didn't really notice a big quality drop-off. This is probably because a lot of the show is the characters just standing there and talking to each other, but because of that, the few action scenes that we do get do look pretty nice. With that being the case, I do have to mention that there were some instances of noticeable CGI, one being the classic army of CGI monsters, and the other one being their vehicle of choice. I did overall feel pretty positive when it came to the world design. The cities that they visited captured the fantasy vibe pretty well, and added to that, there were also a lot of smaller details adding to the visual world building, such as the city of the winged people being more vertical and harder to reach by foot. Of course, added to that, there's a lot of generic scenery to make up for the bulk of backgrounds. One area I didn't vibe with too much was the character design, as they were clearly segregated into foreground and background characters. When it comes to the background characters, they were a standard, non-flashy, don't detract from the main cast type of background characters. One thing I noticed with them, however, funnily enough, is that they all kind of shared the same 2 or 3 outfits, without any color swaps at that. And then getting to the foreground characters, or, the main cast. While they do stand out, I didn't really like their designs. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with them, but especially for an isekai, they are just not that unique. I mean, looking at Luthos, she's supposed to be this high-level MMO character, but her design is incredibly tame for that. That aside, let's move on to the music, as the OST is pretty well balanced, and there's a track for every situation. There isn't really one that I would pick out as a standout, but at the same time, there also isn't one that I would say this does not fit. The soul of this anime is inherently isekai, down to the music. That being said, I was glad that they did not rely too much on it. Sure, most of the bigger scenes were accompanied by a fitting track, but there were also larger stretches of just quiet, with some sound effects and the voice lines. One of them being the scene where Luthos gets summoned first. The entire thing is quiet up until the point where she flies off. In that regard, it was executed quite masterfully. When it comes to both the opening and the ending, then I can say that I did enjoy them, and that you can mostly guess what the show is about from the opening alone. You have your rocky song with an MV that shows Luthos being left alone by the heroes, the characters being shown mostly in order of appearance, down to the scene where the main character, Luthos in this case, is reaching out their hand to the sky or to themselves. Overall, it hyped me up pretty well for the episode, and as such, it did its job pretty well. The ending has a similar thing, where you can make some pretty good guesses about the story, and I feel like it was a bit of a mistake not to alter it for the first 6 episodes or so. I won't say too much, but when you'll see it, I think you'll get what I mean. Added to that is the song that they used, which to me had some sort of eeriness to it. I don't know even exactly why, but the start and ending parts, together with the visuals, just gave me a little bit of discomfort. In isolation, however, it's just your average J-pop song. And this already brings me to the pros and cons. As for the pros, it is a fun power fantasy isekai with some nice concepts. It has some pretty good visuals and world building, and the animation is consistent with some peaks during certain scenes. As for the cons, the anime feels really like a prologue to a much bigger story. The character design is just not that interesting, and there's just too much front-loaded info dumping. In conclusion, A Wild Last Boss Appeared is not a bad anime, and certainly did not disappoint when it came to my expectations. That being said, it is very much a classic power fantasy isekai anime, which we've seen plenty of times already. With that, I would rate it as worth a shot. If you like isekais or power fantasies, you might get a kick out of this one. I would say though to err on the side of caution, and maybe wait for the entire thing to be fully adapted, since it really did not leave off on a good stopping point. Now if Last Boss wasn't your thing, or you liked it and you want some more, then here I have some recommendations for you. First off is Tsukumichi Moonlit Fantasy. It has a similar structure to the whole power fantasy and goddess thing. I also think it has a slight similarity when it comes to the gathering of companions. Then the second is very different, as I recommend Katana Gatari. The reason I picked it is A, because it's a good anime, and B, because it has like this gathering aspect to it as well. In this case it's swords and not the 12 family stars, but it has this structure of going from one sword to another, just like Last Boss has from one star to another. And this concludes this review. Could I help you decide if you want to watch Last Boss or not? Is there something you disagree with me on? Or is there another anime you want me to check out and review? Then just leave a comment down below, and while you're at it, why not subscribe?